Welcome to the Friday edition of Unexpected Points. I have a special guest for this Friday edition, and we also have best bets for the week, preview of Wildcard weekend and Monday night. And then we're also going to put our heads together and solve the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to get them all fixed up and ready to go, where it'll only take 4 or 5 years before they're going to be ready for playoff contention again. This is Unexpected Points. Let's get to it. All right. I might have oversold the specialness of the guest. No offense to you, Ben. But,
no offense.
But you were just here like on the other episode this week. But what I think I'm going to do going forward, I'll have Ben come in periodically for these ones where we're fixing different teams, but also maybe bring in an outside voice who actually knows these teams a little bit better than I do. The specifics of them has been hemming and hawing all season long about what they could potentially do to turn things around. But that happens to be you for the Minnesota Vikings. Right. You are a suffering Vikings fan, despite the fact the Vikings have at least been competitive for a while here.
That is, I don't want to segue too much into the Vikings discussion, I guess, but yeah, how do you measure competitiveness? And then how do you actually measure the job of a GM and how well they're actually performing? I do think are two interesting questions that not very many people are even trying to answer right now. Right. So people are not. I've seen, we have a list of guys that they're looking at. So we'll talk about that. So anyway, we're going to backload that. I know that's the exciting stuff here. People want to talk about Minnesota. Everyone's like Vikings, Kirk Cousins, what are we going to do? It's like universal. Everyone cares about that going into Wildcard weekend. So we'll backload that. Have you something to draw you in for the second half of the show. But first, before we get into Wildcard weekend, the only real news I can talk about is the David Culley was fired, and we had a pretty quick 180, 360 on the feelings here, where initially it was, he's done a good job. They didn't give him a chance. Then Schefter Baum came out with the fact that he was only guaranteed for 2 years, and everyone said that was such a joke, and he set up to fail. And then another piece of information came out. I'm not sure who it was, dropped this last one to end up getting spread. Sometimes it was the same people spreading one and spreading the other. Right. It says, in fact, he's going to be getting paid for the next 3 years. So $22 million in total for 1 year of work. So everyone had to quickly pivot to outrage about something else after this is done. But $22 million, 1 year of work, 66 years old now. Sounds like a nice retirement package. And I know some people were going to be mad about the potential 2-year deal. That would have actually seemed kind of smart to me, for the fact that we all thought the guy was going to be let go after a year anyway. I'm questioning the financial management. And I want to say, can these guys balance their checking account after a while here? If you're just giving out $22 million for a year of David Culley to get what you knew was going to be between 2 and 5 wins. Right. I mean, that's basically it, right? Obviously, people kind of didn't like the hire initially. I guess it makes even less sense now, because he did probably exceed, at least it came close to exceeding betting market expectations, right? Which is really, if you're going to judge the guy in any sort of manner when he was expected to go, 3 and 14 or something like that, I think that is probably a safe judge of how well he actually performed. But yeah, it seems like a complete disaster. I have not, had any faith whatsoever in Houston's organizational structure or management here over the last couple of years. And I just think this is kind of another nail in that coffin. So maybe they're getting Brian Flores. It seems like the timing and all that, where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe that's how it's all going to go.
Well, Gerard Mayo is the talk.
Right? Is it? Okay. Man,
Gerard Mayo from New
England.
From New England, from the Patriots, which of course, New England South, they'll try to build because New England, I guess Detroit's not really Midwest, is it? But I was going to say New England, Detroit, Motown, New England, that works so well with Bob Quinn from the Patriots, and then bringing in Matt Patricia there. And of course, there's just corpses littered all throughout the NFL of former Belichick head coaches there. Maybe it'll work there. I think the Flores thing, which is interesting, and I think a reason why he may not have as much pickup, as some people think he's going to have in a lot of places, is, maybe he's just like kind of a pain in the ass, right?
Right.
He seems to be he wants to control things here. And you have Caserio, you have, Easterby in the background, like Dr. Evil in the background, trying to figure out what's going on here and controlling things. Do they really want to bring someone in where they're going to have to see that much control to him? Maybe they bring in someone like Gerard Mayo, someone who's not on the tip of the tongue when it comes to head coaching positions. Maybe they can bring him in and, be comfortable with the fact that the power share can stay mostly on their side.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that's kind of how they set it up in, David Culley's first year as well. He sounds like he was basically nothing more than really a yes man. That does seem to be at least somewhat what they're after. Obviously, they want to bring in some name recognition or a guy that can actually maybe motivate the players in a little bit more of a way. But yeah, I do think, Flores sounds like he would probably be butting heads with the Texans brass as quickly as possible. So I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the right hire. It is interesting the time would be. Maybe it is just a Jared Mayo thing. I don't know this. I don't necessarily think, like you said, Patriots of the South is really going to work out all that well, unless that is kind of where Bill Belichick decides to retire or something like that. In any other capacity, I don't really think there's going to be any way that the Texans are successful trying to bring in half the brass from New England or anything like that.
Yeah, well, everyone's going to Austin with their NFTs and their Bitcoin, so maybe Bill will be there. Another little thing, David Culley. Hey, no state tax there in Texas, so
you can't beat that. 22 million.
Keep collecting them checks, And one thing I'll push back. I mean, congratulations to Culley, but I've had some people where the reaction was if this guy like he almost made the playoffs or something, as if something big. I had people using the word, I saw multiple times the word vastly outperformed. Okay, they had 4 wins, 2 against the Jaguars. Okay,
that's the only thing the only reason why they even came close to their win total, right? Is because they got to play.
Yeah, I mean the win total fluctuated between 4 and 5-ish sort of wins, and they got 4. And if you look at the other games that they did win, like when they beat the Titans outgained them by 225 yards in that game. Even when they beat the Patriots, they were just bomb plays to Chris Conley and Chris Moore and all these guys. It was ridiculous sort of plays. But, they stayed in it. They got more wins than a couple of teams. So I guess that makes them look good. And in point differential, they were better than Jaguars and better than the Jets in point differential. So, it wasn't a total disaster. I'll give you that. But vast outperformance may be a little bit of an overstatement there. So congratulations to Mr. Culley. Enjoy your time in the sunset, and rest in power, David Culley.
If only we could all be as lucky as you, right? To be a yes man for 22 million.
Yeah, I'm willing to take just $2 million if you want to do that to be a yes man, and then take 3 years off of my career. Before we get to the weekend's action, our thoughts about the bets here, I want to quickly discuss the fact that you can get a 25% off subscription PFF with promo code Unexpected. Show the bosses that you not only enjoy the pod, but you want to get in on that draft and free agency season that is coming. I put out a couple articles this week on the most valuable non-quarterback offensive player, the most valuable defensive player. That's locked content that you can get 25% off with promo code PFF. Lots of stuff that Ben is putting out there every single week, whether it be DFS or betting content, you can get now 25% off with promo code Unexpected. So I want you to check that out. All right, so let's get into the weekend. Maybe we'll just highlight some news-ish sort of things that have come out, which has not been a lot. It seems like teams are actually fairly healthy. You see a lot of players coming back there. So I guess that is probably where I will start. Now, the teams that have the most players coming back are ones that aren't even playing this weekend. So it's not a big factor here. But thinking about it now for Wildcard weekend, when you're building in your modeling for this game, what all is going into it? I mean, I'll just talk quickly what I have, because I have my power rankings that I'm deriving based upon how well the teams have played, some prior in it, a very tiny bit of prior for the team, and then quarterback ratings are built into that. And I'm trying not to adjust too much based upon 2 different factors. One being like who's coming back necessarily, the pieces outside of the quarterback. I'm trying to adjust too much based upon that. And the second thing being these teams that didn't have a bye, but they maybe had a de facto type of bye, like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, how do you think about those things? Because people are starting to make a big deal about the late Sunday finish in overtime for the Raiders versus the Bengals, who just didn't play most of their high level starters, including Joe Burrow. How do you think about that? Because the betting markets seem to be buying into, and so were my numbers to start the week, seem to be buying into the Raiders, where that line has moved from, I don't know what it opened at, something like 6.5 down to as much as 4.5.
Yeah. So 6.5 in the couple spots when it first opened up, basically kind of Monday early morning, even late Sunday night. So definitely moving in the Raiders direction. I do think FanDuel is basically the only spot 4.5 right now. You do still see some 5.5s clinging out there. So it is kind of interesting that this is the one game where the market does have a pretty wide distribution of current spreads that we're looking at right now. And I do think some of that is kind of what you touched on, this idea of rest. And who obviously has the advantage there. Not only is it the Raiders had to play on Sunday night, they have to travel back cross country, play Cincinnati in like the early slate on Saturday, one of the earliest slates that you're going to see from an NFL football perspective. So definitely, I would say, should influence at least your idea of how these teams are actually going to perform. Again, there's also some other narratives surrounding this particular matchup. Derek Carr's performance in the cold weather. We got Joe Burrow, how he handles pressure, specifically pressure when there isn't a blitz situation. So kind of, do you buy into the Bengals where, for all intents and purposes, they're basically at their top? Las Vegas, I would also say, is in a similar boat. I do think that they have greatly exceeded expectations. They've kind of become almost a team that a lot of people, especially public bettors, do want to back. So I was inclined early to lean Las Vegas. I do think this is a spot where I really like the under 49-point total, and I don't have a really strong preference on like a spread of -5 right now. It's basically kind of how I'm seeing it from my model's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest factor that goes into this, and the reason why some people may be a little bit surprised by the movement towards backing the Raiders, is, what people's models are telling them, probably, or people were betting this, or what it's telling them. This is the same thing that my numbers say. When I do like a team strength number based upon my adjusted scores and the point differentials, and then I make an adjustment for quality of opponent, I give like 60-40 weighting to offense versus defense. The Bengals come up with like as being like a league average type of team. And
right.
A lot of people probably don't see them as that. And the Raiders are below league average-ish sort of team, but not so much further to justify any sort of wide spread. I mean, if we're talking about a home field advantage getting you maybe 1.5, 2 points in this type of environment where it's shrinking more and more, if you want to add on another point or two for rest, something like that, we're still getting out to as much, if you see these teams as being equal, as being 3.5, 4 points. So that, I think that's why it's settling maybe at 4.5, 5 points, is because maybe there's only a point and a half difference between these teams on a neutral field right now, where people are talking about Joe Burrow being the MVP of the league and Jamar Chase being the offensive rookie of the year, and T. Higgins being this emerging type of option. I just feel like the narratives around the Bengals are not really matching up with what the hard numbers are telling people. And presumably they saw some sharp bettors put their money where their models were early, and that's what has moved it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we have the Bengals basically 11th overall on our, ELO rankings from PFF.com. And the Raiders are 16th, right? So not a really wide distribution. I do think a lot of people, it gets
bunched up when you're in the middle, right? When you're in the
really,
middle,
really bunched up when you're in the middle, right? And I do think a lot of people have this idea or mentality that the Bengals are a top 5 team in the NFL right now. And I just don't think that is the case whatsoever if you're actually doing any sort of power ratings calculation or modeling to kind of, jive that out. It just has been somewhat unsustainable production, especially on some deep passes to Jamar Chase that have been really successful. Of course, Joe Burrow has been really accurate, has been able to make those throws, but just doesn't seem like it's going to be the most sustainable path forward for them. So I think that's why there's a little bit of a disagreement between all power rankings and maybe what the general public believes for how good the Bengals actually are. But I think you hit the nail on the head. We are seeing some home field advantage factors folded back in, especially in 2021. I do think in a spot like Cincinnati in the playoffs, 2.5 points, another 1.5 basically for the rest differential. Then you're looking at really, like you said, a point and a half. Kind of separating these two teams from a power rankings perspective. And I do think that's probably a very fair number moving across from 6.5 to 5.5, because obviously 6 is a pretty important key number here, especially one that we've seen matter significantly more so now that they kind of adjusted the 1.2 point conversion distances. So I agree with you. I do think 5.5 though is a tough spot to bet for, I would say, either side in a lot of ways. I do think if you're looking at a 5.5 now, I'm leaning more towards almost a play with the Raiders on the money line, kind of moving down through 3.5 or something like that. That's kind of how I would play with it. But 49, I think it's going to be a lot of points in the game that I just don't see as much offensive production, and somewhat based on factors that we've already talked about. Also just the Raiders' ability to potentially get some pressure on Joe Burrow, make him uncomfortable, some drive stall out early on, and there's just no chance we get over that number. So
yeah. I mean, like for the numbers here, as far as the success rate offensively versus the efficiency on EPA per play. I mean, I'm looking down here. We're going back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think it's been 9 games since their percentile for success rate has been higher than their percentile for efficiency. So all these games, they're doing it. So that might make you think that there's a consistency to it. But then again, there were a handful of games in the front half of the season where the opposite happened, where they were successful, but they had turnovers. Burrow, he was like leading the NFL in turnovers at interceptions at one point in time. And that's kind of flipped around. So there's obviously always a possibility that can flip back in the other direction. And I think that's really the theme, is the Bengals people being a little more skeptical of the Bengals than the hype surrounding them at this point. The next game I want to talk about, well, it depends. Do we want to go in order here of what's gonna happen?
We gotta go in order.
Okay. So what is it? I guess, is it Buffalo, New England? That's Saturday night.
Buffalo, New England, Saturday night game in the cold, 10-degree weather, no real wind to speak of here. We got a 4-point spread for Buffalo. I think it's like a 44-point total. So
yeah,
what are you seeing from a modeling perspective?
I got nothing. But the one thing that I'll point out about this dynamic, and again, like how we feel about these two teams, I'll just point out, we have some evidence going back for the fact that these two teams have played each other 3 times over the course of the last several weeks. So we had New England in Buffalo, 2.5 points. I think that was pretty solidly there, even just like before we knew that it was going to be a total shit show when it came to the weather. So it was right around that sort of thing. Buffalo 2.5. So again, now we're out to 4. So we've seen where it's moved since then. Again, when you flip it over and you go back to the Bills in New England, it was about 2.5 points. So I think at that point in time, that New England game where Buffalo came in and won that game, I think that shifted a lot of people's perceptions on these teams. Jones had beat up on some shitty competition, as he's done a few times this year, and put up some big numbers. But again, the gleam is off of him a little bit for the fact that he's had 4 of his 5 worst graded games in the last handful of games here that he's had. So for me, this is just an appropriate number here. Like if it was 2.5, like it was before, I was a little bit higher on the Bills at that point in time. I would be on the Bills here. If it was, if we're getting way beyond 4, again, if we're getting up above 5 or getting closer to 6, then I would be on the Patriots. But it's kind of like my opinion on these two teams hasn't changed that much since the first time they matched up against each other. It's really just the market has come back into line with where I was at that point, because I think one of my best bets were the Bills in that first matchup that they had at home versus the Patriots.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I bet the Bills as well at -2.5 against that, in the Patriots game, and it was just a complete disaster. So
painful
to say the least. I mean, it's one of those spots in the market, basically, it was a total game for sure in a lot of ways. But I mean, I do not like the spot really whatsoever for New England. I do know that, PFF Greenline does have a lean strongly in the Patriots direction on both the spread and the money line. I just don't think that New England really matches up that well. I do think, Josh Allen, although he's been somewhat inconsistent at certain points throughout the 2021 season, I do still think he is, top 3 to 5 best quarterback in the NFL. I don't think Mac Jones is anywhere close to that. He's been hidden in a lot of stretches through this 2021 season. Obviously, really good offensive line, making things easy for him. But I do think that the Bills' defense, especially, is going to cause him a lot of problems. I do think that Josh Allen's not going to have too much difficulty putting up points against the Patriots. So I do expect this one maybe to be a little bit more of a blowout than what the betting market is projecting. I don't really have a bet on it right now at -4. I was hoping to, when it was at 3.5, I was hoping we could maybe move it down to 3 or something like that, and then I would really be buying into the Bills, but haven't really seen that movement too much yet. So it might be a spot where I'm looking more in game if the Patriots get up early. But yeah, I don't love the Patriots side, so I'm more in a wait and see approach on this matchup.
Yeah. I mean, even the game that the Bills won in New England, I mean, defensively, this Bills defense has been better against the pass than it's been against the run. It's basically been the best defense in the NFL against the pass, which is really driven why they're so high up. And by EPA per play, they're number one also, and then number one against the pass. And then against the run, it's not that far down, but you can't really run on a team that much if you are down, and the Bills have put it on a few teams here. And again, that was a game against New England where Mac Jones did a credible job of trying to bring them back passing the ball. But I think that's really going to be the key, is who swings it in that direction. So you have two different things that can happen. Number one, if the Bills get if the Patriots get a big play or something where they can get a score early, I think that's going to be important for them. Number two, if Josh Allen gives them short fields by turning over the ball, that's going to be the other important thing. So again, I just feel like this is fair. I think it's a bad matchup for the Patriots, but there are enough things that can go wrong for the Bills here that I wouldn't want to go ahead and lay the 3.5, go all the way up to 4 and then do it at this point. It's just a little too much for me.
Right.
Okay. So the Saturday early game, I believe, is Dallas, San Francisco. Is that right?
So we got Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, Tampa.
The early game.
Oh, right. Dallas always gets more love. So yeah, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay. Again, I don't have anything on this because I have the Patriots. Not the Patriots. I was thinking Tom Brady. I still have the Bucs as being the best team in the NFL by these numbers. I know you want to make a lot of adjustments, and I know people have cooled on them. I know that the wide receiver core has been hollowed out. But for that reason, even at 8.5, I don't really sense that much value. The news on this one, and I don't really know which way it'll play it, but the news on this one is the fact that we're talking about 20, 30 mile per hour winds and rain and what that means for this game, where you think that would help the Eagles, or at the very least, it would help whoever is a substantial underdog in tightening up the game. But I don't know if we can even be certain of that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is the correct approach if you do think the weather is going to be as bad as what some reports are indicating right now. The other question based in this match, I know you talked a little bit about it earlier, but the Buccaneers seem to be that one team that is kind of getting some guys back and healthy, potentially, especially along the defensive front. Front 4, front 7, if Levante David ends up playing. It sounds like he's returned to practice, Jason Pierre-Paul as well. So this is the one team that is healthy or getting healthier outside of the teams that have a bye here. So I do think that will help them match up against the Eagles, a little bit more of that run pass option with Jalen Hurts. If David's actually able to play, the question is, is he going to be a full go or not? But I agree with you. I do think the Eagles make the most sense at +8.5 if you're looking to get involved with anything on the spread. One reason is the weather. The other reason is I do think that Jalen Hurts, especially on early downs, is going to be able to take advantage of Buccaneers defense that we have ranked 11th overall. I do think name recognition a little bit more than anything else is the reason why they are so high right now. Obviously, people really like them against the run, but I think Jalen Hurts is more of that dual threat running. A quarterback should be able to probably be successful on the ground a little bit. So I like the Eagles here, maybe a little bit in relation to the weather. I definitely think that helps them. If Tom Brady isn't necessarily able to make every single throw to his banged up receiving core. If that game slows down a little bit, if they have to be, Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones show, I do think that plays into an Eagles cover, and maybe is the recipe for them potentially winning out right here.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these kind of like gun to my head type of situation.
Right.
I'm going Eagles, but not confident enough to decide to
lay
do
it
that
down.
Without. Yeah, not really confident enough here. Okay, so let's move on to the Cowboys and the 49ers. The line here is 3.
Some 3.5. I think some 3. Yeah, I'm seeing
3.5 still out there, right?
Yeah. There's a few 3.5s popping up now. It looks like a little bit later in the week. I do think it was a consensus of 3 earlier. We have a little bit of 3.5 mixed in with, but there's definitely some 3s available as well.
Okay, so the question here is, again, this is the one where the market is recognizing anything that may have seemed to be a little off, meaning like maybe if you went, walked down the street and you asked 100 people, well, actually they wouldn't even know 100 people, but if you ask kind of like your average fans about this, they might expect it to be wider than 3, I would think, with Dallas being a team who until a couple of weeks ago was in contention for the number 1 seed, and San Francisco was a team that needed by the skin of their teeth just to get into the playoffs. And you have Jimmy Garoppolo, the hated one, who's the quarterback there. Like Jesus. And now and now you're talking about a game that's not quite a coin toss, but at 3 points is pretty close. So I don't know. Like, I feel like going into this, if I didn't know what the line was going to be, I would suspect it would be higher. And then I would love to jump on San Francisco because I've been a San Francisco backer. But this kind of reminds me a little bit of the Bills situation here, where the markets come to me at this point. And if anything, I could maybe start to flip over towards Dallas a bit here, maybe at 3. But geez, if it really got down to 2.5, and I think it did for a smidge in a couple of places, if it got down to 2.5, that would be incredible. Yeah.
I was looking for 2.5 for a while, especially when it opened up at 3. I would love Dallas at 2.5, but I'm in agreement with you. I do think that 49ers just seem overvalued by the betting market. I think part of it is, the Kyle Shanahan love. Part of it is, Jimmy Garoppolo has played really well, especially from an EPA perspective. But, Deebo Samuel, obviously, fantasy, love fest based.
Trent Williams back, MVP
Trent
Williams
Williams
in the house.
At least offensive player of the year candidate, right? I mean, come on.
I'm joking about the MVP thing, but PFF loves him so much.
Plus minus. Yeah, didn't he do really well in your plus minus? I guess
he did. I mean, he missed a couple of games, so he's up there. But you know what? Tyron Smith talking about, he actually on a per game basis, I think he was about the same as
he really
as Trent Williams, but he only played 11 games this year, so he's back, he's healthy. I mean, I'd love, again, this is something where I'd have my eyes peeled for a 2.5, but even if this got to 3.5, like you said, it's still 3.5 some places. Like I can't bet the 49ers even at 3.5. So.
I mean, this is a spot to take advantage of in game, right? Like people wait all week to potentially get these numbers here. I do think if 49ers get the ball early or get the ball first, end up having a scoring drive there, we're going to see Dallas basically move it below, 2.5, maybe even lower at 1.5 if San Francisco puts up an early touchdown. So that's what I am definitely targeting here. But what do you think about the 51-point total? I feel like that's, moved up a little bit here. I'm not sure exactly with, overall league-wide trends, scoring being down, if the under is the correct play or not. But I do think that at some point we're going to see Dallas's offense potentially turn it on pretty significantly. Here's my
again, I don't really have anything on that one. I think it's a fair number. I mean, I think that you could, like, if this was 2020, then obviously like everything would be inflated. We're talking about a game that's in Dallas, so there's no weather concern. So we would probably see something in the low to mid 50s, but we just, we just aren't seeing it this year. And the Cowboys offense, despite being pretty good on a success rate basis, it's just not been able to juice that efficiency. I think they have fewer, although I do think they maybe they're due for some bigger plays. But I do think if you look at like Zeke eating up a bunch of carries, you look at guys like CeeDee Lamb, guys like Amari Cooper. Cooper's probably like their big play-ish sort of threat there, and he just hasn't been doing it so far this year. Michael Gallup would have been another guy who was a big play-ish sort of threat. But the reality is when your two top guys who are going to be accumulating the most touches are CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott, they kind of give you a little bit lower of a upside and a higher success rate type of offense, and that's what they've had. That's what they've had this season.
Right, definitely. I do think losing Gallup shifts things around for this offense quite significantly. I do think people say, Cedric Wilson can basically just slot in there.
Killing.
Cedric Wilson killing. He is killing, but yeah. So that, like, what happens basically is CeeDee Lamb kind of shifts from that role that you were just talking about in the slot to mainly being outside. I think he was like in the slot on 60% of his offensive snaps when Gallup is in the lineup. With Gallup out of the lineup, he's basically running a route on 85% of his routes outside. So definitely shifts some things. He has graded better on the outside versus in the slot. So maybe that helps Dallas' offense a little bit, but I'm inclined to lean more in the direction that Lamb is, like you said, from a success rate standpoint, really productive in that slot position. Opening things out wide with Michael Gallup is a much better Cowboys offense than what they have right now. So we'll see. Yeah. I had the Cowboys as kind of my trendy Super Bowl pick. I think maybe they're just a little bit overvalued, like always in a lot of ways. So maybe if we see a top end offensive performance from them, maybe that's a spot to then buy into. But I think it's definitely a wait and see approach for me right now.
I mean, of the teams that I consider to have real like high end potential, they're certainly the least positive sentiment around them right now, as opposed to other teams, whether it be the Packers. Well, maybe the Bucs kind of fell in that a little bit, but I think even compared to the Bucs, whether it be the Packers, the Chiefs, the Bills, people are pretty excited about all of those teams, are relatively excited about those teams going into the playoffs. Okay, let's now get to Sunday night and the Chiefs and Steelers showing the power of their fan base, putting this sacrificial killing into prime time.
1.5, right?
Even Big Ben is betting on the Chiefs, I believe, from how he was talking about it. He said they had no chance. He said they have no chance. So I think he's just going money line Chiefs, putting his entire year's salary
game check on, right?
Year's salary on that. Now, my numbers like lean a little bit towards the Steelers, because like, how can you get a number big enough to go towards the Chiefs, despite the fact that I see the Steelers as being a pretty well below average team right here? It's just the Chiefs and these other high end teams have not been high end enough to justify 13 points. Right. So if you wanted to plug your nose and put something down on the Steelers, I think that's probably the way to go, despite how ugly that last matchup was and the fact that you could be writing that off, a tax write-off you could have before halftime. But that's the only way that I can go on this.
Yeah, I'm not even going there, right? I made it a point to not back Big Ben. I think like a year and a half ago, basically right along there, like 9, when they were like 8-0 or 9-0 or something, I was like, you know what? Enough's enough. They're fraudulent enough. I just can't do it anymore. And I don't think I've backed them since then. So even though they might be the correct / sharp side here, with Big Ben not even believing it and nobody else basically believing it either, I'm just going to watch in anticipation, hopefully grind out some Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 passing touchdowns or something like that.
Yeah. I'm sure. I was going to say Big Ben rushing.
Maybe it's 0.5. I mean, it's the only thing he's got to play for, right? I mean, this is
kneel downs. You're not going to get those kneel downs at the end. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, let's get to Monday night now. The inaugural Monday night football matchup of the Rams Cards. 4 points it looks like here. Have we seen anything else on this? Are you seeing anything else out there? Oh, actually 5. I see.
I see a 3.5 at FanDuel.
Maybe I don't see a 5 actually. Now that you mentioned that, you're right. 3.5.
I don't see a 5. Yeah.
Okay. Here's my thought on this. My thought on this is like at 3.5, gun to my head, I could go Rams on this one. I think the Rams are a better team than the Cardinals. And the offense for the Cardinals, it started off really good to start the season. I think it's kind of faded back into the trouble that we saw in previous years for what they had done. And the defense, we talked about this a little bit in our wrap up, just hasn't been that great recently.
No.
I mean, they got a scoop and score to start the game, and they still got handled pretty easily by the Seahawks last week. And I still think the Rams are like a really good team. I know that Matt Stafford loves, spotting 7 to the other team with a pick 6, but that's not, I think what we see in the second half of the season from Stafford is not sustainable, meaning it's going to regress towards fewer turnovers. I think we saw in the first half was clearly not sustainable. So I think if we get somewhere in between Stafford, somewhere in between Rams offense, we get a Rams defense, which is still loaded with talent. I feel like they can handle things. And
I mean, the Cardinals haven't taken advantage,
right?
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals
are like, they have fans.
Those...
They don't even have fans. They don't even. Right. Is the Red Sea coming to LA for this game?
It's going to be a quiet sea. No, yeah. I don't think they'll travel that well. Like you said, the Cardinals haven't necessarily taken advantage of those turnover situations, especially last week against Seattle. So even if Stafford has one of his patented Stafford throws, who's to say they're going to be in line to take advantage of it? But yeah, 4. I mean, this is. Kind of goes back to like how they're actually coming up with this number sort of thing. We have, the Rams is the 5th best team in our ELO rankings, Cardinals 12th best. So there is a little bit wider of a discrepancy if there was
that's huge. Advantage. I mean, that's huge when you think about
that is a
like
pretty big
right.
Especially look at like the distribution of those, rankings in relation to like how muddled they are. Like you said, in the middle, more so on the extremes. I think the Rams are basically like that cutoff of like an extreme that has, much higher than the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th ranked team. So I agree with you, but yeah, it does seem to be just a little bit short if you do think the Rams have any sort of home field advantage, not really any other factors, but the Cardinals, with Antoine Wesley out there running, routes for Kyler Murray running around in the backfield, it just is not going to match up well against a Rams defense that should be able to kind of, lock them down. So I'm with you. I think the Rams are the only play here at 3.5 and 4. We'll see how things shake out for the Cardinals, but
yeah. So here's my take. I'll let you have your take after. So my take is, I think the Rams, even at 4, but I see there's a 3.5 at FanDuel, but it's -115. So I think the Rams 3.5, 4 would probably be my favorite. Then the Raiders, if you can get them at like 5.5 or whatever, it's you can get it 5.5 a couple places now, and then maybe plug your nose in Steelers, but that's questionable at best, as far as my picks here. What do you want to wrap up with?
I mean, I want Raiders Cincinnati under 49, I think, for my favorite bet. I also like Philadelphia plus 8.5 quite a bit as well. I think those two are my favorite, and I'd be inclined to maybe lean on Dallas even at -3. I'm definitely looking for some -2.5s in game, but those are my 3 full-on senders here in the wild card round, I will say. So
all right, print it, book it, pay off.
We'll see what happens here on Tuesday.
Pay off your debts with that one. And before we get into solving the Minnesota Vikings, which we will do soon, let's solve your grooming problems. Or your grooming issues. Cheers to 2022 and resolutions that you can actually keep. How about having clean and shiny balls all year round? At our sponsors, Manscaped. They're here to save your balls this year and there's a lot of ball in here, and make the ball drop into 2022 the cleanest and sexiest ever. Set your first New Year's resolution with good intentions and join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. With our exclusive offer, go to manscaped.com, use promo code PFF, 20% off and free shipping. Set your first New Year's resolution with good intentions and join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. With our exclusive offer, go to manscaped.com and use code PFF for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping, code PFF at manscaped.com. It's new year, no pubes. We're still hitting that.
There we go.
In 2022, Manscaped. And you just heard about a lot of places, a lot of bets that you could potentially make. Well, how about DraftKings? The NFL playoffs are here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is kicking things off with a huge offer. Counting down to Super Bowl 56, new customers can get 56-1 odds on any wildcard team to win their game. Just bet $5 and win $280 in free bets if your team is victorious. If the sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you still have something to play for this wildcard weekend. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes, daily fantasy contests. There's a Saturday slate. There's a Sunday slate. There's a showdown on Monday night. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF and get 56-1 odds on any NFL team. Bet just $5 and win $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's promo code PFF this weekend at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wagered. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's go ahead and knock out the last one here. Western and Southern want a chance to have the ultimate game day feast, whether it's football success or financial savvy. Winning starts with asking us questions. Would you like to know what it's like behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast to celebrate football's favorite Sunday. We'll cover your catering up to $2,500, coordinate your order from a restaurant near you, and have it delivered on February 13th, 2022. And don't forget to check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/feast. Chris has been knocked out of here. That's one more time. That's westernsouthern.com/feast. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. And remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. All right, my man. You are now in charge of football operations for the Minnesota Vikings. So Mike Zimmer is gone. Spielman is gone. Spielman's gone. And
is Kirk Cousins gone?
No, Kirk Cousins is there. Whereas this is real time. And you have a list of GMs that you are going to interview that I have in front of me here, supposedly. And I don't think they have any official coaching hires, but let's start with GM and coaches. Okay. Right. And of course, this is going to apply to some other teams here. So according to Ben Gosling, beat writer with the Star Tribune, there are 8 candidates the Vikings have requested to interview for their GM job. That is a couple of candidates from the Browns, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Glenn Cook, who's the head of their personnel there with the Browns, Brandon Brown from the Eagles, who I believe is also like the head personnel guy.
Yeah. Personnel.
Catherine, I don't know her name is Reich, with the Eagles. She was the first assistant GM in the CFL. She also did some work from the XFL on player personnel. She's been with the Eagles for, I think, a year or two, not that long here. Monty Austinfort from the Titans, Ryan Poles from the Chiefs, who's kind of like the number 2 guy at the Chiefs, John Spytek from the Buccaneers, and Elliot Wolf from the Patriots. Elliot Wolf has been around. Famous. He's
Ron Wolf's son.
Yeah, right? Ron Wolf's son. He worked for the Packers. He worked for the Browns when Glenn Dorsey was there. John Dorsey, excuse me, was there. And then now he's with the Patriots. So we got all these names here. Yeah, you have any ideas for who you may like amongst these names, being that I don't know a whole lot about these dudes generally. Right. Or what do you care what you're looking for in a GM beyond the, analytics tropes that you want to throw out there about process oriented, trust the process, do this, do that, or just how you would contrast it maybe vis-a-vis how things have operated in the past.
Right.
What sort of mentality do you want this person to have coming into a situation, again, where I think you can go one of two directions. You can kind of double downish, or you could do some very painful restructuring going forward.
Right. And I think the deep, dark cut needs to happen for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think they've necessarily bottomed out yet, especially with Kirk Cousins' contract, especially with that contract still being on the books. So I would love to see like a multi-year thought process going into this. And it comes down to this question of like, how do we actually evaluate successful GMs, in a regime? There's like, obviously, the most successful that we've seen basically in the past 20 years has been what? Bill Belichick is probably, the one guy to look at. I think a few others that I think maybe have had some success. Kevin Colbert, who's going to retire, it sounds like at the end of this year for Pittsburgh, has been there in quite some time. And then it was kind of really Rick Spielman, right? In a lot of ways, really successful. People thought, his drafting ability and those sorts of things were the mainstays and reasons for why he should continue on and being a GM. But I think that evaluation of a GM is probably missing in a lot of ways. I do think people want to use this idea of like win-loss record, playoff record, how they performed, in like a points for versus points against mentality, but there's no real solid metrics-based approach to evaluating GMs. And I think that is maybe one of the first problems. So I would honestly look for somebody that is maybe capable of actually articulating what that success should look like and how they would even evaluate and judge being successful in that particular role. And I do think that would glean a lot into that, analytics trope that you talked about, being process oriented more than anything else, being able to actually evaluate your own successes and failures in this particular position is something that I do think I would like to see from a strong candidate in a lot of ways. And outside of that, like the Ringer article kind of talked about this as well. But there's really only two feeder systems for general managers right now, right? There's basically like the player personnel approach, and then there's more of the cap specialty approach. And what that article found is that, it seems like the cap specialty, the guys that can actually navigate the salary cap, are a lot more beneficial long-term to an organization's success than a guy that, is basically what we would describe as almost pitching darts, throwing darts and hitting on certain draft classes. So I'd much rather have a guy that I think is key and can negotiate and handle the cap situation more so than a guy that people think has like a keen eye for evaluating player talent, right? Because I do think that is much more of a hit or miss proposition than the guy that can actually navigate the cap. So I would kind of look more towards that direction. Thankfully, the Vikings definitely want to, it seems like, poach some sort of talent from these organizations that we would consider really well run. They got two people basically coming in from the Eagles, two people from the Browns, the Titans, the Chiefs, the Buccaneers. They're all kind of represented. The Patriots, of course, with Elliott Wolf as well. So I do think leaning more so in the cap guys direction, if you bring in somebody like that in, is the approach that I would like to see. So I do think, Catherine Reich, like you said, is really interesting, kind of has done it all, isn't necessarily just, a scout or player personnel type person. I do think she has kind of a really interesting background, probably not, the quote unquote, maybe not necessarily even like the perfect resume for a GM, but maybe isn't like, shoehorned into always going to be the person that is going to be a GM. A guy like Elliott Wolf is probably somebody that I would think more fits along that lines. That's the reason why, outside of a number of other things, maybe not necessarily buying into the Patriots way, being all that successful, he's a guy that I'm not really that interested in. So I do think like Catherine definitely has quite a bit of appeal in my eyes. Also a guy like Kwasi Adufa Mensah as well has kind of an intriguing background. I know you talked about this a little bit, on Twitter and some other places when that Ringer article did come out, but having people from varying backgrounds, I do think is the best way to kind of have a process-based outcome that is going to be successful long-term, is if you're getting some of these outside thoughts and ideas in place. And I do think that Kwasi Adufa Mensah also brings that to the table more so than a lot of these other candidates. So I like those two quite a bit. A couple of them I'm not all that familiar with. Of course, for the most of them, I haven't been all that familiar with outside of a couple of days ago. I'm not necessarily this, GM guy that can, evaluate how successful they've even been in their current roles, and even, what really quantifies and makes up for a successful GM. But just my initial thoughts, I do think those are the two candidates that jump out to me the most. And I do think that relationship with an actual forward-thinking, analytics-based head coach is definitely the only way that the Vikings are ever going to compete for a championship, in my opinion. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on how you'd actually evaluate, what even goes into being a successful GM?
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned the article from the Ringer. So the gentleman that they interviewed there, Mike Ford, who runs a company called Sportsology, which advised multiple NFL teams on how to structure their organizations. He was also dubbed the NBA Kingmaker because of his influence in basketball. He's a former executive for the Chelsea Football Club. So I think what he said, the main thrust of what he said is that there are a couple of different inefficiencies. One, that they don't have a lot of time in this cycle. Right. And the second thing, which I thought falls into line for some of these guys, is he says the other is the owner's default strategy is to look at teams that went to Super Bowls and try to hire that general manager's number two. So again, I don't know a lot about these guys who were on the list here. Like, I don't know Ryan Poles with the Chiefs, whether he's doing great or not. I don't know about John Spytek with the Buccaneers, whether he's really that great a guy there. The Titans have been successful. They haven't gone to a Super Bowl, obviously, but Monty's been around a bit longer there. But especially when you talk about the Chiefs and the Bucs, like, have they done any like sustainable kind of process-oriented type of stuff that's going to get you to a Super Bowl beyond saying, hire Andy Reid and draft Patrick Mahomes and fill around some talent and boom, you're going to get there for the Chiefs and go get Tom Brady in free agency if you're the Bucs and nail your picks basically. So again, those to me smell a lot like, let's just get some of that magic dust sprinkled over in our front office that they've been sprinkling over there, and we'll see how it works. And again, but I was encouraged, like you mentioned, by the guys coming, the Browns and the Eagles. So let's get right into diagnosing some of this stuff here, because I'm looking at our friend Jason Fitzgerald at Over the Cap, his site Over the Cap, where you can do some calculations on here at what we can do with these guys. So let's talk about Kirk Cousins. Like, how are we going to get out of this? I think you can go one of two ways here. If you're trying to trade him straight up, it's a $35 million salary someone is going to have to take. You're going to take a $10 million cap hit if you trade him, which you're very willing to accept at this point if you're getting out. The question is, where do you move that lever on how much salary you're willing to eat here to get rid of him? Because if you're probably going to have to lower that at least by 10 million, I think, for someone to take it.
Right.
So it could be 15 million. It could be 20 million. Like, is that something that you'd be willing to do? And if you do that, then you start looking at other guys that you got on here. Danielle Hunter, you have on here for a
pretty substantial hit, right?
$26 million cap hit, where again, if you can trade him, maybe you're still going to take 11 million in dead money. You're going to save 14 million if you wanted to do something like a 28-year-old, because he's not going to be around. He's not going to be worth it by the time you're back competing again. You have Eric Kendricks, who has a $13 million cap hit here. He's 30 years old. I don't think he's been very good this year, but you tell me. You watch him a little bit more closely. His numbers have at least fallen off some. So again, if you want to cut him, you can save 7 million and you're going to lose 5 million. So the problem here is, like, even if you get rid of Harrison Smith, 33 years old, right?
They just re-upped him, before this season, right?
They just re-upped him. They just re-upped him.
Just insane.
So Anthony Barr, but that's all.
He's coming out the books, thankfully, this year.
So that's just, he has dead money that's just on there, I think, from some void years. So the point is, there's no clean cuts on this roster. It's a roster that has, I think, somewhere close to 150 million tied up in its top 8-9 players from a 220 million cap. So if you're taking money with Cousins, I don't understand how, I don't see how you get out of this without fire sailing, getting very little in return in means of trade compensation, because these guys are, again, like, they're, you're talking about 28-year-old being the youngest guy. You just signed Dalvin Tomlinson too. So I think you have to keep him, because it's just cost prohibitive to think about getting rid of someone like that. So you're going to have a bare bones roster. You're going to be setting records in the amount of dead cap that you're taking. Right. And you're not going to get much trade value back in return. So I don't know. The more I start to think about it, like, is it possible that you could just try to get through one more year with this core and hope everything works? Is it really feasible to say we're going to have 60 million in dead money or something like that this season?
Right. And I guess I don't hate running it back one more year. Right. But then, like, what's the expectation? What's the ceiling? Right. Like, what's one more wildcard
making the playoffs? Making the playoffs is the ceiling.
Yeah, but what's that? Yeah, so, like, that's not going to get you all that far, and that was the problem with the Kirk Cousins experiment, probably, that we saw, after his first extension. There was just no way they were actually ever going to be able to get to the Super Bowl. So then, what is success, right? And if success is a first round playoff exit, then that's something that I want no part of. I'd much rather just make it hurt. I'd much rather just bring on more pain, get rid of Kirk Cousins, even if I have to eat half of his $45 million contract, right? $22.5 million. If that gets him out the door next year, I'm willing to take that if I can get a top 3 draft pick basically coming up here in 2023. That's my approach now, right? Because they've tried everything else. They've tried, putting a Band-Aid over things. They've tried bringing in the free agent quarterback in an aging roster, and it just hasn't worked. So adding to that aging roster instead of actually making some of these difficult decisions and making some of these cuts and turning the page is just a spot that, like, I don't think Vikings need to be in any longer, because it's not going to work out for them if they ever actually want to win a Super Bowl, which my question is do they actually even want to win a Super Bowl? And I don't know if I can answer that question right now.
Let me try and sell you a little bit on running it back for one more year, because the more I've been thinking about it, the more I think maybe it's the way to go. So first off, the problem that they've had the last few years is they keep digging. They're digging. They're just keep on digging, right?
Right.
So first solution is stop digging. Okay. You don't have to necessarily start filling up the hole and tossing out value, dead money left and right here, but stop digging. Okay. Stop. So don't sign anyone. Don't sign anyone new.
Right.
Don't extend anyone. Don't restructure anyone. Get under the cap. And then set yourself up in 2023, because what's going to happen in 2023, again, I just don't think you're going to get trade compensation if you try to get out of some of these contracts. So 2023, Kirk Cousins is off the books. You're going to get maybe some sort of comp pick for him when he goes and signs
third or fourth round or something, right?
Yeah. So he's off the books. Kendricks, he flips to, if you cut him, he flips to having $6 million of dead money to only having $2 million of dead money. Harrison Smith, he flips to having like $8 million of dead money to, well, geez, he still has $5.
Yeah, he still has quite a bit for a 35-year-old safety. So.
Okay. But listen, further, Adam Thielen, he flips from having $11 million of dead money to $6 million of dead money. So I guess my larger point is, like, I feel like that could really be the year. You have no quarterback plan. You have nothing. You got when Kellen Mond walks in the room, it makes Zimmer want to throw up just seeing him. Okay. just his presence. Okay. It's like a guy who stepped in dog shit. Okay. Just like, it just
smells awful. Right?
so you have Sean Mannion. Okay. You got nothing. So, like, you made your bed, you've been digging. It's time to take the shovel away. Maybe sign some dudes to 1-year type of deals and make some strategic cuts and signings. And then 2023, you flush it all out. The problem with that, of course, is, like, you're probably not going to have any success even on a limited basis until 2024 at the earliest.
Earliest, right? Yeah.
And then you're bringing guys in now. So you, like, your GM and coach situation is going to have to be like, we're going to have this, you're going to have this, like, lame duck season now. Then you're going to have a flush it and rebuild season next year. So you might not be able to track the most talent with that sort of thing, despite the fact that I think that's a little bit overplayed angle, because there are only 32 coaching jobs in the NFL. So somebody's going to jump at it who's probably decently qualified.
Right. So you're saying that the Vikings are hiring David Culley this year, and then hopefully Dan Campbell next year is basically
Culley would be insane, because I think that would probably offset the money that he's getting for free.
Oh, yeah. So he's not doing that whatsoever.
So he's probably not doing it, but well, let's talk coaches real fast here, because I think it's also interesting, because I think Doug Peterson's name's been in there. Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's name is.
So I think the Lane Kiffin
that was Brad,
died.
By the way. That was Brad Spielberger. You can't trust that guy. You can't trust that guy.
I love Brad, but yeah, that one was. I think that was
PFF. You can't trust PFF. Nathaniel Hackett. I didn't even know this guy existed. I didn't know this guy existed. I knew he existed, of course, but he's kind of come out of nowhere as being a popular thing. Eric Bieniemy's name's thrown in there just because, like, every year we want to talk about why he didn't get hired, I guess.
Right.
So he's thrown in there. But what's interesting to me about guys like Peterson and even Bieniemy, to a fact, is, like, Their stock, I feel like, has fallen a little bit from the fact that you have this whole, like, everyone's Kubiak, Shanahan. Like, Peterson is clearly not that. So is he even an attractive guy to bring into some of these places where Kirk Cousins has been playing well in this diametrically different system? Anyway, so what about coach? Like, who are you going to get to come in for this?
Right. So the Vikings don't have any scheduled interviews right now. Obviously, they're trying to take care of the GM search first. That's going to be a big influence on who they actually hire at the.
Do you like that, by the way? Coaching. Do you like going GM and then coach? The Browns last year flipped it because, like, I don't know. Do you think you get more alignment or less? I think you might get more alignment if you go coach GM, just knowing that the coach is going to be more of the man. The coach is going to be more of the man.
Yeah. What angle? Because I do think that in a lot of ways, Zimmer and Spielman, that relationship, like Spielman was probably more so the man than what we would even like see from a front facing, public viewpoint. So I do think the approach of the Vikings has been to kind of have that GM in place and then mold the coach around him in a lot of scenarios. So if that works for him, that's great. I personally do think that the correct play is to go GM first, get that set, make sure that you're aligned with, everything that you want to be aligned with at that position, and then get a head coach that fits in with the GM. That's kind of what I like. I mean, obviously, a guy that has been talked about a lot recently, 49ers offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, I do think would be pretty decent, at least guy to kick the tires
on. Looks like
he
should be sitting at a poker table for like
that's why I love him,
50 straight hours, like a poker stars hat or something. He'd be like, Mike McDaniel has made the final table, everybody.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I thought that clip that was shared of him about like tossing the ball, and it was just like this shit is not like it's not that complicated, like,
right. It's just like people just loving on him for they're just like eating it up basically right now. But yeah, I mean, we talked about Brian DeBole. I do think is really intriguing prospect for my a coaching prospect from my eyes. Kellen Moore, I do heavily lean towards the offensive minded coach, so I do think that obviously is the popular approach to take when trying to hire a head coach, but I do still think that is the correct framework with which to work.
How about this? How about this? This is what you sell, because you got to sell the coach on something. Because again, I was thinking about how disgusting the idea is that you're coming in to coach Kirk Cousins for one lifeless season and then going into rebuild. I think we have to sell the coach on right now, and maybe you got to just like bite the bullet, even if you're not in love with whoever these prospects are. You got to sell them on the fact that you're going to draft somebody in the first round this year. This year.
Well, this year or next year. I mean, 2023 is kind of the quarterback class, right? Obviously, there are some options. There are some options this year, but there's just nobody.
What if the Vikings go on a run next year and they're like, and then you don't even have a pick that's very far up. I'm just saying
that's why you got to get rid of Cousins, because there's no way they go on a run with Kellen Mond at quarterback. That was my thing. That's why
you're just like tank. Get the tank.
I'm on full tank mode. Vikings have never done it properly. As much as I want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl, I kind of want to see them tank a little bit more, because they've just never done it.
If you're going to tank, you really need to make sure you have that alignment, because finger pointing is going to start. It's going to start very, very quickly when you don't have that. So. Okay,
that's why they brought in David Culley. That's why they got to. I mean, there's got to be.
I'm saying my theory is draft a quarterback in the first round. If you got to draft another one next year, do it again. I don't care.
Right. I would be fine with that too. If they draft Sam Howell, in 2022 and somebody else 2023,
one last year for Kirk Cousins. It'll be like Big Ben send off, except for it'll be Kirk Cousins send off here in Minnesota. I mean, you don't want to rob the Vikings fans of knowing this is Kirk Cousins' last game in Minnesota, so they so standing ovations. Kirk Cousins week and renaming the street outside of the dome.
They can put him in the Ring of Honor while he's still playing in that scenario. So I don't mind that one quite a bit. That'll be right next to Randy Moss, basically put up Kirk Cousins. So, and then he can go back to Washington or something. We'll see.
Okay, so you're on Team Tank. We'll see what happens as we're moving through. I think those are the two options, though. It's just a lot of dead money to stomach, which maybe can happen. Maybe it can happen, and I think it's hard for a coach to come in to say that's going to be the plan. But maybe if they draft a guy, so keep your mock drafts at PFF available. Look for some quarterbacks, talk yourself into somebody, I think that's probably the way
I'm going to go
here.
do a mock draft on PFF.com after this episode. I'm going to draft all the quarterbacks, basically. Then we'll see what Kirk Cousins thinks about that. So,
oh man, you got a lot of work. You got work cut out for you, Vikings.
Right.
So whoever gets the job there, Godspeed. And hopefully Kirk Cousins, PFF top 10 quarterback, will continue to be there going forward. Any last words of wisdom for the Vikings brass before we kick it off here?
No, I mean, I got nothing for you. I do agree. Godspeed. It's the only thing that can save us now. So we'll see how it works out in 2022. But
okay,
dark times lie ahead. Dark times.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So looking forward to the least optimistic offseason probably of any NFL franchise this offseason for the Vikings. But again, we're always building towards something. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. We'll hit another team. We'll see. Maybe I'll go Seahawks. Maybe I'll try to get Ben Baldwin or someone on here to talk through another team that is trying to get rid of their quarterback. Try to get rid of their quarterback. Who's got a little bit more success. They're Kirk Cousins in the offseason. Otherwise, rate, review the pod. We'll be back at you. I guess we'll come back on Tuesday. We did Monday this week, but we got the Monday Night Football game. So we'll hit you up Tuesday morning for late morning release as a review of all the different games. And otherwise, enjoy the super Wildcard weekend. They tried to market that died a little bit last year, but enjoy the super Wildcard weekend, everybody.